Hello, it's Madeline here, and I'm going to help you sew your pointe shoes today. So if this is your first pair of pointe shoes, or if this is your 15th pair of pointe shoes, it's always nice to have different tips and tricks on how to sew. So first things first is when you get your pointe shoes, they don't have an assigned foot to them. They can go on either foot. So what I always do is I always put them on both feet and feel which side feels better. And then when I decide, I just take a Sharpie and on the inside, on the inside of the shoe, write left and right with a Sharpie, so that way I don't confuse them. Because once you start wearing them on that foot, it will start to mold to your foot and it will shape to that foot, so you won't want to switch them. So you'll want to keep them on each foot. So figure out what shoe is going to be on which foot. So next we're going to start with sewing, and I always use flossing, dental floss to sew with because it's really tacky and it's a lot stronger than just normal thread. So you can buy this at any store for like 99 cents. It's the best thing in the world. So you just take your dental floss. I take a pretty long piece because there's nothing worse than having to rethread in the middle of sewing. And then you just thread the floss through the eye of your needle, and then you're gonna double it up. So I'm gonna bring the ends all the way down together, straighten them so they're the same length, and then from there you want to come down to the end and double knot a knot down here so it's nice and strong. So here is one knot. And try to keep it as close to the end as possible. We can trim it, but you don't want too much extra floss at the bottom. And then here is double knot number 2. So I have quite a bit of, probably an inch or more of extra floss. So I just take my scissors and I cut the extra floss off. So then I have about a tiny little bit left. And this is what I'm going to use to sew both ribbons and elastics. Okay, so I like to start with my elastics. So I ordered my pointe shoes on the phone because I know what size that I want and everything. So it got shipped to my house. So they came in 2 separate pieces of elastic, but normally they don't. So if yours comes in one long piece, I literally just fold it in half so it's equal, and then I just take my scissors and chop it so you have 2 equal pieces. You might not use this whole piece of elastic for one side of your pointe shoe, but I never cut it until I have one side sewn. So put one elastic to the side and take the one that you're going to work with. Take one of your pointe shoes, and on the back of your pointe shoe you have this thick piece of satin that's like on the heel of your shoe, and if you flip your shoe inside out, then you can see it also on the inside where it has the seam in the back. So I work from that, and I'm going to take one of my elastics and I'm going to line it up so that the tip of my elastic is touching the seam on the inside, and you're making a triangle from this edge to this seam and then the edge of your elastic. So there's a little triangle right here, and that's where I'm going to start. So I just hold it there with my fingers, and then I take my pre-threaded floss, and you work from the inside of the pointe shoe first. So I'm going to poke a hole through the elastic, through the satin, and it's going to come out on the other side of the pointe shoe. I'll show you here in a second. You might need a thimble because that is kind of hard, so you're not killing your fingers. So you pull all the way through until the knot is on the inside of your pointe shoe. Then you're going to flip it around, and we're going to make little X's. And so now I'm going to put it in on the outside of my shoe to the inside of my shoe and poke it all the way through again. And then pull that tight, and I'll show you what that looks like. And And that is basically 1/2 of an X. So it's just tiny, tiny, but you're making an X. So there's 1/2 of the X. And then I'll show you, and I do that 2 times. So I'm gonna go over that X, that 1/2 of the X one more time. 1 second while I get this through. Poke it through. And then now I'm gonna go to the other 1/2 of the X. And do that 2 times. So here's 1. And here's 2. And then at the end of this one, you should have a beautiful little X that's been over 2 times on each little cross. So let me show you that. Okay, so here we go. We have 1 X now. Little X. Now I do 3 X's. So I'm gonna go ahead and do this real quick, and then I'll show you what it looks like at the end. Pointe shoes. One thing I forgot to note is that when you are sewing, don't ever sew on this top brim of your pointe shoe, because that is where your drawstrings are. So these are your drawstrings right here. And you're going to need to pull them tight here in a little bit. And if you've sewn on the inside of this drawstring container, like it's just, that's where it is. It's all threaded through this little bit. And if you've sewn there and you've sewn over your drawstring, they won't be able to pull and tighten, and you really need them to tighten. So don't sew on the drawstring satin, sew below on the body of the shoe satin. Okay, so I finished my 1 elastic. So here what it looks like. I have 3 little X's right at the base of my elastic. And my thread is still attached. So you're probably thinking, how do I cut this off without my my floss unwinding when I'm dancing? So what I do is I flip my shoe inside out again. I take my thread and I hook my needle under one of these threads, or multiple. I usually do multiple. Just hook it underneath, and then I pull it, and then I've made a circle with my thread, and I put the needle through the middle of the circle, and then I pull on the other side, and when I pull that down, that creates a knot. And I do that about 2 or 3 times. So let's do it again. Pull it through the middle of the circle and pull a knot. Just gonna do one more for safe measure. Pull it through and middle of the circle, pull it tight. You have a knot. Then you can take it, and at the base of the thread, you can just, or the floss, you can just cut it. And then that's what it looks like on the inside of the shoe. Kind of a hot mess, but on the outside it's fine because you have 3 beautiful little X's. So that's what it looks like. Finished. 3 little X's, and now I have one side of my elastic done. Okay, so now you need to sew the other side of your elastic. And you cut your thread off. You still have the needle at the base of your thread, but you don't have a knot anymore. So now you need to do two knots, double knot it on this side, and then you can have the thread to work with again. Because if you don't, then it will just pull right through and you're sewing for no reason. So double knot it, cut the extra part of your floss off at the edge, and then we're ready to go with your second side of your elastics. Now, this is where it customizes for every single person. So you've sewn one side of your elastic in a pointe shoe. This is my other pointe shoe. You've sewn this in and you have a loose edge. Now, everyone's ankle sizes are different, and so this is where this is gonna be a little bit different for every single person. But what I do is I put my pointe shoe on with my toe pads and anything else that you plan on dancing with, because you need to know what it's gonna feel like for real and not just your bare foot in the pointe shoe. So put your toe pads on, slip your foot into your pointe shoe, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so I'm gonna turn the camera around so you can see my foot, so you can see what's going on with my pointe shoe. Okay, so here's my foot, and my one side of my elastic is sewn, and the other side is what I need to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reach down, and I'm going to take my elastic around the side of my foot and see about how much elastic I'm going to need. And it needs to be snug. You don't want it too loose or else your pointe shoe will fall off, and you don't want it too tight because then you'll be cutting off the circulation to your foot. So for me, this is the perfect amount of elastic that I'm just going to take it and sew it. But for some people, it might be way too long and you might have to cut it off a little bit, or yeah, that should be the only two scenarios. If it's perfect or if it's way too long. If it's too short, you're in trouble. Okay, so for my second side of the elastic, I like to pin the elastic, because if I don't pin it, then I feel like it slips around a little bit and then it makes it more challenging for sewing. So I just take any old regular sewing pin. Mine's kind of bent, but that's okay, it still works. And I take it, I take it with my foot in my shoe and kind of figure out where it needs to be. And then I would pin, take your pin and poke from the outside of the pointe shoe in your shoe, and then you're going to just pin this elastic to the inside of your shoe. So you have a pinned elastic now, right there. And you're gonna do the exact same thing that you did on this side. You're gonna make 3 X's where you double loop them on each side of the X 2 times, and then you tie it off. And then you have 1 elastic done. Okay, next up is your ribbon. So take your ribbon out of its container. And typically this is just in one long piece. So, oh yeah, mine's in one long piece. So it's just like folded in half. So the edges are together and this is just folded over. So I just take my scissors and I cut it in half. And you might not use, you're gonna have to trim these later, but don't trim them until you tie your shoes. So now I have 2 pieces of ribbon, and that's what I'm going to work with. So typically what you'll see is, you'll see people who will then take this and cut it again, and then you'll have 1 ribbon on one side of the shoe and 1 ribbon on the other side of the shoe. And I just don't like to cut mine in half, because if you cut one and so let's say you have your pointe shoe and you have 1 ribbon on one side like this. One moment while I get it together. Like 1 ribbon like this, and then you have another ribbon like this. If one of these ribbons falls off in the middle of a performance, you can't dance because your ribbons are flying all over the place and it's not safe. But what I do is I don't cut it, and then I just bend it down below so it's underneath the arch of your foot, and then you just sew it like this. But that way, let's say one of your ribbons, the sewing like pops off, this is still tied around your foot. So then when you're dancing, you can still continue to dance because it still has one side of the ribbon tied on and it's just tied around your foot. Now with that being said, I have had so many students and so many peers over the years whose ribbons have broken in the middle of class, the middle of performances, rehearsals, all that stuff. I have never, ever had my ribbons or elastics fall off by sewing my shoes this way. So I promise you, if you sew it like this and take the time to do it, your ribbons will not fall off. Now, it might feel like you're sewing for an absolute eternity. And the first time it probably will be, because this is new and you're learning. But every time you get a new pair of pointe shoes, you get faster at it. And now I can do it pretty fast. So don't worry about it, but take the time because it's totally worth it instead of having to do it in the middle of class because your ribbons fell off because you didn't do it right the first time. Okay, so this next part, what you do is you take your ribbon and you're gonna tie it around your foot, and then you're gonna slip your foot into your shoe. So I'll flip the camera around and show you. Okay, so here's my foot, and I have already pre-tied this ribbon around my foot. And you can see on the bottom, I have not cut it, so it's just going all around the base of my foot and the arch. But now I'm going to take this undone and show you how to tie your shoe. So the trick is you have to have the ribbon on the inside of your foot has to be much longer than the ribbon on the outside of your foot. So if you can see, that is how long it is, but then on this side, it's much shorter. So there's a huge difference. And that's because this ribbon that you're gonna take on the outside of your foot, you're gonna take it and you're gonna wrap it around your foot 2 times. So 1, and then 2. Now you take the ribbon on the, so that was the ribbon on the inside of your foot. The ribbon on the outside of your foot, you're going to take and wrap around 1 time. Take it, wrap it around 1 time, and then you have to tie this in a knot, which is gonna be difficult with one hand, so 1 second. And typically you need to double knot it, but I'm not going to right this very second because I don't need to because I'm not dancing. So you're gonna make, it makes an X, and then 2 wraparounds right here. So that's what your shoe needs to, your ribbons need to look like tied. So now that I have that tied, now I'm gonna take my pointe shoe that I had sewn the elastic on and put it on my foot. Okay, my elastic's on. Typically you would then tie your ribbons over it, but it doesn't matter because we're just trying to figure out where you want to sew your ribbons. And where it usually always falls is you have the seam on the middle of your foot, and mine usually always falls right about where the seam is. So what you can do is you can like pinch right here and then take off your shoe and then pin it and then sew it, or you can just hold it like this. It's up to you, but you're gonna pin it and then you're gonna sew your ribbons. Okay, so I took my pointe shoe off my foot and I pinned that ribbon to the pointe shoe. So now you can see a little bit better what I'm talking about when I say that this is the inside of my shoe. The inside ribbon is much longer than the outside ribbon. So it has to be because you have to tie it around your foot 2 times instead of 1 time. So from there, same thing is exact same thing as your elastics. You're just gonna sew 3 little X's, going double over each side of the X and then tying it off. You're getting so close. Okay, so now you gotta do the other side of your ribbon. Because you've got one side, now you gotta do the other side. Now you wanna be really careful not to pull it super tight so that there you can stick your finger underneath your ribbon. You actually want to lay it down and give it a little bit of slack because you don't want this ribbon pulling on the underside of your arch when you're doing pointe work because it will be really uncomfortable. So you just lay it down so it's nice and lax through, and then you line it up on the other side just by the middle seam again, and then you can pin it again, and then you do it again. 3 little X's, and then you're almost done. Okay, so I'm gonna show you a little bit more up close how to sew your pointe shoe with both my hands. So my drawstrings are still untied. We're gonna get to that next, but you have your long ribbon on the inside of your foot and then your short ribbon on the outside. You take your long ribbon on the inside and wrap it around 2 times to the inside of your foot. Then you take the outside ribbon and wrap it around 1 time. So, whoops, it got away from me. Till it comes around to the middle. Then you double knot this, and I like to do a square knot. And then I have a little bit of ribbon left, or after my knot. And what I do is I just roll that up, and then I tuck it in these ribbons below. And what you want is there's a little bit of a divot behind your ankle bone, and that's like the perfect spot for that ribbon. If you tie your ribbon and the knot comes on the back of your ankle on the front of your ankle, on the outside. That's incorrect, and it can cause some tendonitis issues. So you really have to have it tied on the inside of your foot. Another thing that is really important is that you do not cut the extra ribbon on your pointe shoe until you've worn your pointe shoes, danced in them a few times. Because sometimes pointe shoe shops will give you lots and lots of ribbon, so you'll have tons of extra ribbon hanging off, but you don't want to cut closer than like 3 inches until you have danced for a couple times in them, and then you can cut about 1 inch away, and then you need to burn the edges with a lighter. And that is how you tie your shoes. Okay, final step of pointe shoes is your drawstrings. Your drawstrings are really important because they help your shoe stay on your foot. If you don't have drawstrings, it's a lot harder to keep your shoe on your foot, even though we have ribbons and elastic, but drawstrings are really super important. So here's my trick for drawstrings. What you do is you stand up in your pointe shoes and you put your foot on a full point. So here, let me show you. Okay, I put my toe on a full point, and what I'm gonna stand up and show you, is you're gonna then take your foot to a 3/4 point. And what you're gonna see is this is actually a pretty good fit for my foot, but there's a little bit of gapping right here on the edge of the shoe, and most times you'll see a lot more than just that. So what you want to do is from your 3/4 point, then you take your drawstrings and pull it until that gapping is completely gone, and you're going to double knot this. 1, 2. Now you have all of this extra drawstrings. Let me tell you something. When you first cut them, you can cut 3 inches away. So I'm going to cut this part off, but do not cut any closer until you have danced in them for a few times and you've decided that that is a good tension for your drawstring. Because if you let it go out through, then you've lost your drawstring in the drawstring track, and you have to go fish for it, and it's really difficult. So please don't do that to yourself. So just cut a few inches away and call it good. Now, once you cut your drawstrings, after you've worn them for a few times to the length that you want and you'll keep, then you're going to burn the edges with those, the lighter as well, and then you are done with your pointe shoes. Now, the thing about drawstrings is that you don't want them hanging out all over the place because they kind of get in the way and they're a little distracting, and no one likes the look of them. So you need to tuck them inside of your pointe shoes. Right now you can see that these drawstrings are hanging out, and I cut them a few inches away until I figure out if I like that. But what I do is I just pull it a little bit, pull that knot out a little bit, and then I'm just going to tuck them into my shoe like this. Tuck, 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 until you can't see them anymore, and then they'll start to stay down there once you wear them for a little bit. That way you have no drawstring sticking out. And that, ladies, is how you tie your shoes. Okay, so you're halfway done. Now you gotta do the exact same thing on your other shoe, and then you'll have your pointe shoes. Now I'm gonna go over some pointe shoe care and what you need to have in your dance bag with you at all times. So I keep like a little makeup bag in my dance bag, and things that I have inside of it are this is athletic tape. So if you need to tape your toes, some people need to tape their toes because they have bony feet, toes, and they need a little bit more protection. So some athletic tape, scissors. Make sure you have a pair of scissors because everyone will ask for a pair of scissors. We'll get to that in a second. A lighter to burn your edges of your ribbons and your elastics in case of an emergency. A Sharpie, because you need to write in your shoes, your right and left foot. I keep a little, this is just an Altoids container, but I keep ibuprofen in here in case I'm in pain because it happens. Jet glue. I have a whole other video about how to jet glue your shoes, but this is a lifesaver because your pointe shoes will start to die after you wear them for a certain amount of time. Depends on how many hours a week you're dancing, but this can put some extra life into your pointe shoes. So really important to have. Make sure you have it, and then watch my other video about jet gluing your shoes to help extend the life of them. The other things that you will need is floss, because that's how you sew your pointe shoes, a needle to sew your pointe shoes with, and then some other things that I just like to have on hand are little band-aids. So these are like circle band-aids in case I have like a little blister on my baby toe. And then I also have these little cornrows protections in case I have a blister. It just depends on how bad it is and how much support I will need. I also just have regular band-aids in case I need a little bit more support. And then I also have these makeup wedges because you can put these in between your big toe and your pointer toe if you need a little bit, if your toes are getting smushed together and you need a little bit more space down there. But that is the basics of what I keep in my dance bag. And I hope that helped you guys.